Good look. So you go down to tech assignments. There's a fresh new one there that says technology assignment B, random samples. All right. All of these instructions are in the assignment itself on Google Sheets, but I put it here anyway. All right. Most importantly, I think anyway, this little bit down here. Why does it do that? I hate when it does that. All right, this little bit down here. When you're submitting, you want to select file, make a copy. Well, that's even to access it to begin with, because I get a lot of notifications that students are trying to edit the master copy. Well, there's a pretty significant drawback to allowing students to edit the master copy, is that you make a change and then somebody else makes a change to suit their needs, and it blows up because you can't edit the same document. I mean, you can, but you're not gonna do what you want it to do, or it's not gonna do what you want it to do. So you rename the file. It would help if you put your name on it, you know, like last name, tech assignment B, something like that, because I get a whole lot of submitted files that are all called copy of technology assignment B, randomization, you know. So rename the file, and when you're ready to submit, go to share general access and set to anyone with the link editor. All right. Yeah, you got to give me permission to get in there. Otherwise, I can't really help as effectively as I would like to. If you submit it early and you ask me to look at it for feedback, I can make little notes if you give me editing permissions and things like that. All right. So you go to a link. It opens up this massive document. All right. Massive document. Geez, I just choose words and spit it out sometimes. Spreadsheet. And you'll see at the top, data set 1, 2, 3, and so on. All of them, lots and lots of data. Last two are reserved for me. I use those for examples. All right. You're not going to have to work with all the data sets. I'm going to assign you one data set. There's 26 students in the class. So shockingly, I have 26 data sets for you. All right. One for each of you. All right. And I'll tell you, after I go through the rundown, I'll tell you which is which, which one you get. All right. But I'm basically going to assign you a number, and you'll say, okay, I'm data set 2, for example. All right. So there's a total of 30 values, 30 sets of values, I should say, because there are 30 teams in the major leagues. Some teams change their names. This is all information from 2021. So I just put in what the team's name was in that year, because it's not like officially a change until it's officially a change. All right. So yeah, so in case you're wondering about that. The reason I didn't choose 2022 statistics is because when I was putting this together, when I was getting the data, the 2022 season hadn't completed yet. All right. So I just had this data and it was ready to go. And, next year it'll be 2022 if anybody's interested in that, kind of stuff. So I'm going to take you through a blank example. I already have a solved one here. This is what your final product really should look like. All right. If I can get it to stop hopping around on me.
If you could share that would be really helpful. So I can know if I'm on the right track.
This is all, it is shared.
Oh, it is shared?
Yeah. That's the link. If you go to this, yeah. So yeah, I'm going to go blank example here. I used LOB, which is left on base, but I'm going to grab a different set here. And I also put all the category labels here so that you have it. So when you get into the assignment, you can just copy paste that. All right. So all these category labels, but yeah, I'm going to use a random number generator to select 15 teams and the associated data that corresponds to your assigned variable. All right. So I'm going to assign myself the IBB variable. All right. So I want random values, 15 of them. And it will bring back the team name and also the IBB. All right. And you're going to get a different variable here. Instead of IBB, you might have batting average or something like that. All right. But I'm looking at this column here. All right. Now, what I want to do is create a random sample of values that will pull random integers that are going to pull values from this set. All right. That's the tricky part. But once you get past that, it gets a little bit easier. All right. So my random values, first step is equals. You want rand. When you type in rand, it'll bring up different options. Like you start typing the thing that you're looking for, it'll start bringing up options that it thinks is relevant to what you're trying to do. All right. So we want rand between. Now there's a total of 30 values. So you could say just 1 to 30. All right. So 1, 30. And then hit enter. And it'll populate a random value between 1 and 30. So for example, 3. All right. And we want 15 of those. So I would just really copy and paste it down the line. So you could actually do copy paste, or you could drag this little box thing in the bottom right-hand corner until you have 15 values. Oh, it hopped on me. That's the thing. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, actually 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So I need to get up to 17 without it jumping too much. All right. So that would be a total. Stop moving. Let's see if I can get it. Yeah, I get far enough up and then it just hops. So I guess I'm just gonna have to live with that. Oh, now it locks in. Oh, yeah. All right, so I have my random values. Now I want to use the VLOOKUP function. All right, that might be new for many people, but if you're familiar with it, you know the use of it. So equals VLOOKUP. That's vertical lookup. All right, so you're going to look up across vertical columns. Well, columns, because all columns are vertical. So we want to select the array of values that are relevant. All right. So what I'm going to do, open parentheses, I'm going to go into my data sets, and I'm going to highlight everything. There's a couple of ways to do that, but I'll just do it the user friendliest way. All right. So I'm going to start really here, because I don't, well, I guess I could get the titles in there too, but really I just want to bring back anything that is going to be in that list of 1 to 30 values. So I'm going to highlight across and grab, like I said, everything. I grabbed a little too much of everything. It went up on me there. So let me just do that again. It's hopping here. Come on. Got issues with the trackpad here. A mouse is definitely a pretty good idea when it comes to this. If anything, you could just type it in. It would be A3 all the way to AD32. All right, so. All right, so the first cell followed by the very last cell, it'll cover everything in between, all the rows and columns. All right. And you'll notice that this VLOOKUP here is being pulled from, you see in blue over it, blank example in cell B3. Right. So it's pulling this information and placing it in the blank example set. Now it gives an error because I haven't finished putting in the, everything that I want. All right. So what I want to do is tell it what information to give me. All right. Now, if you're ever in doubt, of some relationship. If you have Excel, this is one thing that Excel does better than Google Sheets. Let me just pull that up real quick. I'm going to stop this share and bring it over to Excel real quick. So if you're in Excel and you type in something like equals VLOOKUP or whatever, this one gives you a kind of like a tutorial. All right. So lookup value, table array, column index. I mean, it is possible that you don't know what this represents, column index number and range lookup, things like that. But it is pretty useful that you can, well, let me clear this out. If I didn't know how a count if worked, it'll ask you range and criteria, so that's one benefit of Excel over Google Sheets. The thing about Google Sheets is that it's more portable. All right. But just figured I'd mention that. It's not always relevant, but it's worth getting into sometimes. And actually looking at that jogged my memory. Before we put in where, the array of data, we actually have to put in what we're looking up. That's the lookup part of lookup. So we want to look up this value here, the 21. That can be found in A3. So I'm going to type in A3 before the data set stuff. All right. So what this means is that it's going to look up that number in A3, but then it's going to apply that to the tab called data set spanning from A3 to AD32. All right. Now I want to put some dollar signs around these values here. So $sign on the A, $sign on the 3, the AD and the 32, because I wanted to lock in those values for when I copy paste. So when I copy paste down the line, what it's going to do is it's going to add 1 for every row, and that would be a problem. All right, because then it wouldn't take too long before we run out of cell space or row column references. So now what I want to do is I want to index the particular column. Now, in most cases, it's just counting. So if I go back over here, starting with that first cell, this is in column A, but that's my first column. The team name is in the second column. Third column would be data set 1, fourth column would be data set 2, and so on. What I want here is I want the team name, right? Team name, that could be found in the second column. So I type in a 2. And then the last thing I would put in is it's a Boolean. It's a true false. All it's really saying is, does it have to be an exact match? Yes or no. All right. So is the number that you're looking for necessarily precisely the same as the number in the table or in the array? And that could go either way depending on how you represent the data, but in this case, it won't matter. All right, so you could type in true or false, or 1 or 0, because 1 represents true and 0 represents false. But if I put true, it's going to look in that table in data set, the data set tab going from A3 to AD32. It's going to look for the number that I have stored here in A3. Then it's going to go to the second column. Helps to put the appropriate number of parentheses. And then it's going to report back what we need to report back. My keyboard started fritzing on me. All right, so it'll give a suggested autofill. If you trust it, then go for it. I mean, it just populated an entire list of team names. So my guess is it's probably doing what I want it to do, but it's also possible that it's not. If you doubt that it's working the way you want it to do, don't hit the check, hit the X, but I'm going to go for it. All right, now I'm just going to take a look and see what I have here. All right, so it's still referencing the appropriate rows and columns of the data set. That's the whole table, A3 to AD32. It's now looking up whatever's in A4, which is appropriate. It's going to the second column, and I do want it to be an exact match. So we're good. We got it. All right, and you can check this one. This one should point to A17, and it does. So we're in good shape. All right, so now what I want to do is pretty much the same thing I just did, but I wanted to pull back the column that contains IBB. So I go into this data set here, and I'm just going to count. I mean, they do it alphabetically, but I did put data set 1, 2, 3, so you can kind of figure it out just with addition. But if you don't want to take any chances, you just count cells. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29. All right, so it's the 29th column. Now, it's not going to be too bad because you only have to do that once. All right, the whole idea is to let Excel, Google Sheets pull from the appropriate column, but pull it for every data point. Right, so you don't have to count repeatedly. It would be terrible if I was like, all right, take the first row from data set 17, and then the third row from data set 20, and then the fifth, that would be a nightmare. That's not what we're doing here. All right, so I'm going to do my VLOOKUP. You could actually just grab it from here and modify it. All right, so just do a quick copy, Command C, Command Control, paste it in there. It's going to bring back the same thing because I didn't make any changes yet. All right. I forgot I did the conditional formatting here, so I sort of cheated. Let me just change that real quick because I got to show you how to do that. So I want this now. It still should be pointing to A3, but I want it to give me the 29th row or 29th column, I mean, and then report the values. All right. So all I did, I'll do the check mark here. All I did was I changed this to 29. All right. Accidentally hit the mute button there. It's always fun to talk to yourself. So anyway, I have all my values here. I do want to verify that it's actually giving me the right values. So, oh man, my keyboard. So Cincinnati Reds should be 22 in the IBB column. So I'll go to Cincinnati Reds. That's row 9, IBB column. Yeah, it is 22. All right, so it pulled the right, at least the very first value that it pulled was right. I'd like to think that the rest are right too. All right, so now I have a random sample from the 30 teams, and it is truly random, at least based off of the algorithm on Excel. All right, so what I want to do now is find the mean, median, mode, and all that stuff. A lot of this is very, very easy now. So for the mean, and before you actually do your assignment, all right, in this area here, I recommend copying this over. All right, so copy this kind of blank template over, and you know what, I'll do that here. I'll just kind of put it off on the side. So if you want to pull it from there after I do the annotations, you can. All right, so for the mean equals average. Average of what? Average of all this. It'll ask you if you want to do an autofill. I don't think it knows what my intent is here. You can go to show formula, but I use an average function. It thinks that I want to find averages. I don't want to find averages anymore. All right, so next up is median. A median of all of this. Sometimes it's just a matter of knowing the name of the thing that you're trying to find, because you type in, well, mean won't do you any good, but if you know a mean is an average, you type in average. median actually is median. You have mode. There's possibilities of just an ordinary mode, which is the same as mode single. We want mode mult, right? So if there's more than one mode, it'll bring back any value that is the mode from the set. So then highlight, enter. The one drawback, so when it reports the mode, it puts it in the cell immediately below. All right. So there were two values that were most frequent here. They just put it in two separate cells. Conceivably, you could have 10 modes. You could have, there's 15 data points. Maybe 10's a little extreme. You could have 5 or 6 modes, So what I would do here is just kind of just shift everything down a couple of ticks. All right, but you got to move everything else down with it. All right, so like that. Enter. Oh, I went too far. Crikey. There we go. All right. So if there's more than one, and you see that the second mode disappeared because if I make any changes in my spreadsheet, it redoes the randomization. All right. So if I put it like a 1 here, you see the numbers change. Sometimes there'll be 3 modes. Sometimes there's only going to be 1 mode. All right. So let me just get rid of all this stuff. That's the beauty of something like this. It gives us the flexibility to be able to make determinations of measures of center, spread, and things like that for a malleable data set, a data set that's going to change. All right. So the mean and the standard deviation will all change accordingly. Right. The lower quartile, when we did the box plots or the candlestick chart, first tech assignment, we went over this, but I'll do it again. E equals quartile. We want the EXC one, quartile EXC. We highlight the data set. I mean, you could also just type in, so if I go to highlight, overshot the mark. If I highlight, it'll do it. But if at some point you start recognizing, okay, I'm doing C3 to C17 over and over again, so why not just type that in? I want the first quartile. So I put it in a comma 1. And then I hit enter. All right. So that's my lower quartile. Now, these other values, these are still the mode. So these values are going to change repeatedly. All right. So you kind of have to ignore that for a little while. You could also, if you want, just move it down like a lot or move it over. Some people like to do stuff like that, like I'll put it, like here, for example. That works too. I'm going to leave it the way it was, but however you want to organize it is up to you. All right. I need the upper quartile, so equals quartile. You don't get too far before it gives you some suggestions. Again, I want C3 to C17, but this time it's comma 3 because it's the third quartile. Third quartile, upper quartile mean the same thing. All right. So then I hit enter. My IQR is the upper quartile minus the lower quartile. So that's equals this cell minus this cell. All right, so upper quartile minus lower quartile, enter. Again, it does the autofill. I don't want that because the next up is the sample standard deviation. Now this one's, I have it labeled as standard deviation. This is a sample of values, so it should make sense that we're looking for the sample standard deviation. right? That's STDEV dot S, the second S anyway for savings, no, for standard deviation of the sample. All right. So that function, copy, I keep saying copy, I mean highlight, hit enter. And now you have the standard deviation indicated. All right. We need really all this information except for the median and the mode in order to compute outliers and unusual values. All right. So my interval of non-outliers, this last little bit's a little bit on the more complicated side. All right. So the interval of non-outliers, we're gonna use the count function. Oh, I'm sorry, it's just ordinary computation. We'll need to use the count function to come up with a number of outliers, but the interval of non-outliers is really just the lower quartile minus 1.5 times your IQR. All right. So for me, that's G10 lower quartile minus 1.5 times the IQR. All right. So then I hit enter and it gives me the lower bound. It also does the autofill. I don't want that. So it's saying for outliers, anything less than negative 24 would be an outlier. All right. Good to know. I'm not looking at any values that would necessarily lend themselves to being negative. Right. You don't even have to know what IBB stands for. Just looking at all the data, I don't see any negative values. So I would not be concerned about an outlier in the low end. Right. Also, I just happen to notice this 24 is a little out of whack. If that's the case, it's not lining up the right way. Just go to the horizontal line and just right justify. All right. For the upper bound equals, I'm going to take Q3 and add to it 1.5 times the IQR. So my upper quartile, which is Q3, plus 1.5 times the IQR. And that gives me my upper bound. All right. So any number that is bigger than 69 would be an outlier. All right. So now I want it to tell me the number of outliers, but also it's in the instructions. It doesn't say it here, but if you scroll up, I know I'm going to get stuck, scrolling back and forth if I do that. But we want to highlight any of the outliers. All right. Your instructions on your assignment, I'll show you real quick, is that you're going to go green for any outliers, red for any unusual values. But for this example, okay, well, I guess it's green and red anyway. I just thought I changed it. That was my intent anyway. All right, it is what it is. Green for outliers, red for unusual values. So I'll show you how to do that in a sec. But for now, number of outliers, I want to count any number that's less than negative 19. So count if, right? And again, just like I was mentioning before with Excel, if you go to count if, oh, you can't see my screen, but it was there before. It's range and criteria, right? So I want to count if any of these values are less than whatever I have in this cell, all right? So the less than goes in parentheses, quotes. And this cell, I would just click on it, but I have to put an and symbol in between. All right. So the quotes establishes for Excel, the way this command structure works, the quotes establish that it's a less than symbol. And the and is actually just and. I'm taking the less than symbol and putting it together with whatever the number I want it to be less than. All right. But I also have to account for the fact that I could have outliers on the high side. So I'm going to add to this another count if. same range of values, C3 to C17. And if any of those values are greater than whatever I have in H16, those would also be outliers. All right. So it's going to count up any number that's less than whatever I have in G16 and count up any value that is greater than whatever I have in H16, add those two numbers together, and that would be the total number of outliers. All right, so I hit enter. It tells me that there are no outliers for this data set.
I just have a question. Why did the lower bound number change?
Oh, because it's all dependent on this data set. So when I change the data set, everything is going to change along with it.
Oh, Lord. Okay, thank you.
No problem. But the good thing about that is once you have this built, if I can get it to lock in the right way, once you have it built, you just copy and paste whatever data you want here. Everything else is going to change along with it. All right. So if you're doing a problem on a test and I say that you need to come up with the interval of non-outliers or unusual values or whatever, you just put your data values in here and it'll just spit out everything for you. So there is a benefit to it. It just doesn't always seem that way. All right. For unusual values, usual values, unusual values, same structure. We'll do the conditional formatting in a couple minutes, but equals. Now it makes a suggestion. I don't want a suggestion, so I'm going to X that out. The mean minus 2 times whatever the standard deviation is. So 2 times my standard deviation is here. So the mean is in G5 and the standard deviation is in G13. This is the usual unusual rule. X bar minus 2s, X bar plus 2s. All right. So that's what we're figuring out here. And to find the number of unusual values, we're really going to do the same thing we've been doing, or at least we did for the number of outliers. Unusual values is just different benchmarks, but it's going to be the same structure. All right, so here's my low bound. My upper bound equals X bar plus 2 times my standard deviation. All right. Now, the good thing about what we're doing here is we could take this and copy and paste it right down here, and we'll be, an adjustment or two away. But before you copy and paste it, let's get $ on the C3 and C17, because I don't want that to ever change. I always want it to point back to the original data set. All right, so you get some $ in there. The H16, G16, I don't care about that as much, because once we move it, it should actually move to the values I want it to be. But I never want the C3 and the C17 to change. All right, because if that became, let's say, C18 to C32, there's no data there. So it won't give me anything meaningful. All right, so still the same value here. Now I'm going to copy. Command Control C, paste. This is saying my data set where any value is less than whatever I have in G20, which is right here. That's what I want. My data set, any value that's greater than H20, which is this value right here, that's precisely what I want. So by putting the $ in, I didn't have to worry about the C3 and C17 changing, but I actually did want the row reference to go from 17 to 20, right? Because this data set, like Excel, Google Sheets, knows that if I put a command right below a particular number and then copy and paste it to be below another different particular number, it knows that I want it to point to the cell right above the one I'm working in. So it picks up on that, and you don't have to worry about making any more adjustments. So when you hit enter on that, it says that there for this data set, There are no outliers, no unusual values. All right. But this data set, again, every time I type in something, the data set changes. So maybe there will be an outlier and an unusual value. Maybe there won't be. Maybe I'll have 3 modes and an outlier and an unusual value. When it says ref, that's because it's not coming back with anything. So there's this is Google Sheets way of saying no mode. All right. But it looks like in a lot of the cases here, I'm either getting 1 outlier or no outliers. All right. So, and all this stuff here, I'm just putting in ones just because it's simple. But anytime you make a change in the spreadsheet, that's what's going to happen. It's gonna make a change in the random values. All right. Now, what I want to be able to do here is to determine what the outliers are. All right. And we do that by color coding. All right. So again, green for outliers, red for unusual values. So I'll show you how to do that. That's actually pretty easy. It's more challenging on Excel, but here it's not that bad. So what I'm going to do is highlight the column of data and go to format. You'll see an option for conditional formatting. That's the one we want. All right, conditional formatting. Click on it. It brings up a side panel. And by default, it just starts coloring stuff in. We want to make some adjustments here. All right. And an outlier would be any number that's in between, in this case, -19 and 69. Right. This will change, but I always wanted to point to whatever these 2 numbers are, this one and this one. If it's in between these 2, I think I said it is an outlier. It's not an outlier. If it's not between these 2, then it is an outlier. So format cells if is not between these 2 numbers. So we're looking at G16. Now it's weird how you got to put it in, but equals $G $16, because I don't want it to change where it's looking for that value. All right. So it's always going to be looking for the low bound in G16. It's always going to be looking for the upper bound in H16. All right. So any number that is not between whatever I have stored in these 2 cells is going to be an outlier. So I'm going to hit done and nothing shows up because we did something wrong. No, it's because this data set doesn't have any outliers. So nothing got highlighted. Now it has an outlier. All right, 1 outlier, and specifically that's the San Francisco Giants. All right. Do it again. Few times, no outliers. 1 outlier, back to the San Francisco Giants. I'm noticing a trend here. Now, the thing about randomization is when you randomize, you could get the same outcome twice. So it says that there's 2 outliers, but common sense tells us there's really only 1 outlier. It is the San Francisco Giants. All right. And, few and far between when it comes to additional outliers. All right. And again, if you're wondering why I'm typing in the 1 over and over again, I'm just making a small change in the spreadsheet so that it forces a change in the random values. All right. There's nothing special about the number 1. I could put in a 10 if I want, or the letter A. It doesn't matter. All right. Now I want to create another rule. All right. So basically the same idea as this, except I want it to point to the usual interval. So I'll highlight my data, add another rule. It defaults to is not empty. I want it to say is not between. And now I'm looking at G20 and H20. So equals $G $20 equals $H $20. And now, based on the instructions, I want this to be highlighted in red. So let me click on this little fill option and make it red. All right. So if it's not between G20 and H20, it should highlight it in red. All right. Now, the issue that you might run into here is that sometimes you could have outliers and unusual values, and they'd be the same number. If that's the case, it's going to default to whatever the first conditional rule is. All right. So technically, it's trying to highlight this in both green and red, but it doesn't have the capacity to do that. All right. So in many, many cases, if you have a value that is an outlier, it's probably an unusual value also. Yeah, this data set doesn't really lend itself to that, but you could have a smattering of red and green here. You might have nothing like we're having here because there's no outliers, no unusual values, or you might just have the green, even though you also have an unusual value. It's because it's kind of embedded in the outlier idea. All right. So I was about to say, this is all I'm asking you to do. It's a lot. It's a lot, but that's the idea behind tech assignments. Yeah, because I used to teach this as kind of like a pencil paper sort of thing. And with Excel, it's a whole lot more manageable. That being said, that doesn't mean it's easy. Right. So it takes a little time, might make some mistakes along the way. Send me pictures, send me links, things like that if you get into a jam, and I'll take a look at it. Yeah, if you send me something that is like only kind of like a partial screen grab, I might not be able to figure out what the problem is. But if you're running into trouble and you send me the share link with editing permissions, then I can look back into your work and see what typo you might have made. All right. So if that becomes an issue, just let me know, shoot me an email, and we'll figure it out. All right. Oh, I wanted to do stop recording, not stop share. Stop recording.